So I want you to picture a championship boxing match. You've got, the noise, the tension, all the crowds pushing in.
Right, yeah.
And the fighters step into the ring, and right away, it's not about the knockout punch. I mean, it's round one. So it's about that initial flurry of jabs, the defensive sparring, kind of weighing up the opponent, trying to back them into a corner.
Yeah, and in those opening minutes, the fighters are also, like, playing to the crowd, right? And the judges. They're trying to establish dominance before the real heavy hitting actually begins.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. We are taking you into a first-century showdown today, drawing from this big stack of study transcripts and outlines that analyze a very specific, high-stakes historical confrontation.
And we're not treating this like some dusty theological lecture today.
Right.
The sources make this framework crystal clear. I mean, this text is a carefully planned verbal battlefield.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our mission today, our focus, is this sequence of events recorded in the book of Mark, chapter 12, where this coalition of powerful leaders steps into the temple courtyard to basically take a swing at Jesus.
The context here is just vital to understanding the tension. You have to look at who is actually stepping into the ring here.
Yeah, lay that out for us.
Well, it's an alliance of groups that normally despised each other. You've got the Pharisees, the Herodians, the Sadducees, the scribes, and the priests.
Wait, the lineup.
Yeah, normally they are entirely hostile toward one another due to these deep political and religious divides, but they've united with a twofold agenda.
Right, which the sources lay out for us.
Exactly. First, publicly discredit Jesus to strip away his massive crowd support, and second, trap him into saying something that would justify a charge of treason and ultimately Roman execution.
So the stakes are literally life and death here. They want to force him into a corner where, like, every possible answer is a losing answer.
A lose-lose situation, yeah.
But instead of getting trapped, we're going to see how Jesus evades these impossible scenarios by completely shifting the paradigm. He takes these earthly systems and pivots the conversation to ultimate realities.
And the challengers, they begin with this beautifully constructed political dilemma.
Okay, let's unpack this with the very first trap. The challengers stepping into the ring are this unholy alliance of the Pharisees and the Herodians.
Right.
And to understand how weird this team up is, you kind of have to look at their motives. The Pharisees were the strict, exclusive religious purists who, frankly, deeply resented Roman occupation. They wanted a theocratic Israel.
Yeah, they hated the Romans.
Right. The Herodians, on the other hand, were essentially these Hellenized political opportunists. They tied all their fortunes to the Herodian dynasty, which was, of course, propped up by Rome.
Yeah, they compromised their Jewish identity for sheer power.
Exactly.
But, when groups have a common enemy, they will make the most bizarre alliances. So they walk up to Jesus with what looks like a flawless trap, and they ask, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar?
Which is such a loaded question.
It's incredibly loaded. Our sources use a powerful analogy to explain the sheer danger of that question. Imagine someone standing in a public square in occupied Czechoslovakia during the Cold War.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right? And a crowd asks them, should we pay our dues and obey the Russian occupiers?
That's a trap.
Complete trap. If the person says yes, the crowd turns on them completely. They're labeled a traitor to their own people. But if they say no, the secret police just drag them straight to a Russian jail.
Right, so say yes to the Roman tax, lose a Jewish crowd, say no, go to a Roman prison. And, for a long time, I always felt like Jesus' answer here was just kind of a clever dodge.
Yeah, a lot of people read it that way.
Right. He asked someone to hand him a Roman coin. And that simple action of making them produce the coin, it proves they were already participating in the Roman economy. Like, they're already carrying Caesar's money right there in the temple.
Yeah, Jesus sees right through the hypocrisy. He knows they don't actually care about the theology of taxation. So he asks whose image and inscription are stamped on the coin.
And they have to admit it's Caesar's.
Exactly. So Jesus delivers that famous line, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
I just love the analogy our sources bring in here to explain the mechanism behind this. They call it the passport and the heart.
Yes, that's a great way to frame it.
Governments ask for your citizenship, right? Your taxes, your compliance with civil laws.
Yeah.
That's a passport. But God asks for your ultimate allegiance. That's the heart.
What's fascinating here is the underlying logic Jesus uses to arrive at that point. The coin bears Caesar's image, therefore the coin belongs to Caesar. But the implied, far more massive question he just leaves hanging in the air is, well, what bears God's image?
Humanity does. We do.
Exactly. The coin is just, metal stamped with the politician's face, give it back to him. But human beings are stamped with the image of the Creator. Yeah, Jesus diffuses the trap by shifting the focus entirely. If you bear God's image, he doesn't just want a religious tax or a ritual. He demands the whole person.
So the political operators, they stumble back to their corner. But the tension in the courtyard, it doesn't dissipate at all. It just shifts. The political trap failed, so the philosophical heavyweights decide to take a swing.
Enter the Sadducees.
Right.
The Sadducees were the wealthy, aristocratic elites who controlled the temple economy. They were highly conservative when it came to the texts. They only accepted the first 5 books of the Bible, the Law of Moses.
Okay.
But they were essentially the anti-supernatural thinkers of their day. Because they were wealthy and in charge, they really liked the status quo. They had no desire for this disruptive afterlife where the playing field gets leveled.
The source notes actually have this great little mnemonic for their rejection of the resurrection. They didn't believe in the afterlife, which is why they were sad, you see.
That's terrible.
I know, it's a terrible pun, but it works. It sticks in your head.
It does.
Anyway, they step up, not to get Jesus arrested, but to make him look ridiculous in front of the crowd. They present this elaborate hypothetical puzzle based on a law in Deuteronomy where a man's brother is supposed to marry his widow to carry on the family name. So in their puzzle, a man dies, leaves a widow, and the brother marries her. Then he dies. The next brother marries her, dies, all the way down through 7 brothers.
It's completely absurd.
Totally. Then they spring the trap. They ask, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Because all 7 had her. They're literally just trying to make the very concept of heaven look utterly absurd.
And Jesus tells them they are fundamentally ignorant of 2 things, the scriptures and the power of God.
Right.
The Sadducees' basic error is assuming that heaven is just earth playing on an infinite loop. They couldn't wrap their heads around a reality different from the physical, earthly structures they already controlled.
It's the child in the ocean analogy from Arno.
Oh, yeah, explain that one.
Well, the Sadducees were like a child standing on the beach, trying to fit the vast, unfathomable ocean of eternity into a tiny plastic cup of earthly logic.
That's exactly it. Jesus explains that resurrection life is a transformed reality. In the coming kingdom, earthly marriage structures won't define relationships anymore. He says we will be like the angels, which, by the way, functions as a secondary jab.
Oh, really? How so?
Because the Sadducees didn't believe in angels either.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's pointing out that human relationships will be elevated into a new, perfect reality as part of a heavenly family. He tells them they severely underestimate God's power to change the very nature of existence.
And then he goes a step further, right? He proves the resurrection using the only part of the Bible. They actually accepted the story of Moses at the burning bush.
The scriptural defense here is just brilliant. Jesus points out that God said to Moses, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
The tense of the verb is everything. God didn't say, I was their God, as if they were, dead, buried, and gone. He said, I am.
Present tense.
Yes. If God is currently their God, then they must still be alive in some form. He is the God of the living, not the dead.
Dismantling their trap using their own approved texts just creates this stunned silence. And, watching someone completely deconstruct bad faith arguments often inspires those who actually care about the truth to step forward.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
We see the tone of the entire match suddenly shift here. From hostile combat, we move to this moment of genuine inquiry. A scribe steps out of the crowd.
Now, scribes were the legal scholars of the day, and they loved condensing debates. Like a popular intellectual exercise among them was challenging each other to summarize the entire law of God while standing on one leg.
While standing on one leg. Seriously.
Seriously, just a fun little scholarly game they played. But this particular scribe has been listening. He's genuinely impressed by Jesus' answers, and he asks this sincere, sweeping question, which commandment is the most important of all?
And Jesus answers by merging 2 different texts from the Old Testament, one from Deuteronomy and one from Leviticus. He says the most important is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself.
Notice how comprehensive that is. Jesus demands the entire human faculty.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting to me. Jesus completely redefines what love means, at least compared to our modern perception.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, when we say love, we usually mean like a fleeting emotion, right? A feeling in your chest, something out of a pop song. But Jesus defines love as a response of your whole personality.
Yeah, it's all-encompassing.
You love with your feelings, sure, but also with your intellect, your mind. You love with your physical energy, your strength. It's a total consuming commitment.
And the sequence he lays out is absolutely critical for understanding this worldview. Loving God must come first, before loving your neighbor.
Which is hard for a lot of people today.
It is. Today, many people equate being a good person purely with the second commandment, treating your neighbor well. And obviously, that is vital. But Jesus insists the fundamental duty of humanity is vertical, toward God, before it is horizontal, toward others.
Our sources point out this fascinating observation from missionaries working in cultures with many deities.
Right, the fractional devotion idea.
Yeah, if you have a dozen gods, you have to divide yourself up and give a fraction of your devotion to each one just to keep them all happy. But Jesus quotes the ancient text, "The Lord our God is one." If God is one, he doesn't demand a fraction of you. He demands all of you.
And the scribe actually agrees with him. He replies that this total love is far more important than all the religious rituals and temple sacrifices happening literally right behind them.
And Jesus looks at the scribe and gives this really fascinating verdict. He says, "You are not far from the kingdom of God."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that phrase, "not far," operates as both a compliment and a pretty profound warning.
Okay, unpack that warning for us.
The sources use the analogy of standing outside the door. You can walk right up to a house, stand on the porch, admire the architecture, completely agree with the layout of the place. But being close to the house isn't the same thing as actually stepping inside.
Right. You can be intellectually aligned, deeply curious, morally sincere, but still be standing outside.
Exactly. This scribe had the theological knowledge. He admired the truth. But admiration is not surrender.
Yeah.
To step through the door requires acknowledging that you actually haven't loved God with all your heart and you haven't loved your neighbor perfectly. It requires repentance and the faith to rely on God's help. Intellectual curiosity has a definitive boundary.
That sincere exchange effectively silences the opposition. Like, nobody dares ask him any more questions. The bell rings on the defense.
The first round is over.
It is. This marks the turning point of the deep dive. Having survived the impossible traps, Jesus immediately goes on the offensive. He turns this massive X-ray machine on his attackers to expose the gap between their outward religious appearances and their actual spiritual reality.
Right. He starts with a spiritual challenge regarding their fundamental view of the Messiah. He asks how the Messiah can merely be a human descendant, David's son, if David himself in the Psalms calls him Lord.
It's the CEO in disguise analogy from our sources.
Yes, exactly.
The religious leaders were looking for a political rebel, an earthly king with a sword to overthrow Rome. They were completely failing to recognize the divine Lord standing right in front of them in the temple courtyard.
They wanted a Messiah they could use for their own political ends, not a Lord they actually had to submit to.
Right.
And having challenged their theology, Jesus issues this blistering public warning against the scribes themselves, exposing their lifestyle.
He points out how they love walking around in long flowing robes, which, signal to everyone that they didn't do manual labor. They demand prestige. They expect the best seats at banquets and love being called by special titles in the marketplace like father or master.
This raises an important question about the nature of false religion, because it wasn't just about narcissism or wanting to look important. That public piety was a cover for profound exploitation.
Yeah, Jesus points out that these leaders devour widows' houses.
Right. Scribes often acted as estate planners or legal counsel for vulnerable widows. And instead of protecting them, they would charge exorbitant fees or outright swindle them out of their property under this guise of pious management.
That is just awful.
It is. Then, to cover up this incredible greed, they would stand in public and recite incredibly long prayers.
It's the empty gift box analogy. You see this beautifully wrapped box with perfect corners and a massive bow. It looks so impressive on the outside, but you lift the lid and there's absolutely nothing inside.
Nothing at all.
Their spiritual box was totally empty. They were weaponizing religion for prestige and profit.
And God is never impressed by outward performance or religious titles when the heart is corrupt. He sees the true motives driving the machinery.
Which perfectly sets up the next moment.
Oh.
Right after condemning the empty gift boxes of the wealthy elite, Jesus sits down opposite the temple treasury. He scans the crowd and finds exactly what true devotion actually looks like.
Yes.
We move into the climax of this intense confrontation, and it's just the ultimate reversal. The profound theological debates are over. It's just a quiet observation of an unnoticed woman.
The contrast here couldn't be sharper. The temple treasury had these large receptacles for offerings, and they were shaped like large metal trumpets.
Yeah, and because they were shaped like big metal trumpets, they amplified the sound of whatever was tossed inside.
Right.
Our sources note that the rich would come by and throw in massive brass coins just to make this loud, ostentatious clanging noise. They wanted everyone in the courtyard to hear exactly how much they were giving. It was a total performance.
And then a poor widow walks up to the trumpet. She has two tiny bronze coins called mites or leptons. To understand her financial reality, a single denarius was the standard wage for 1 day of labor.
Right.
A mite was worth 1/64th of a denarius.
Oh, wow.
It was practically nothing. Barely enough to buy a single meager meal. When she drops them in, it barely makes a ping.
But the crucial detail is that she had 2 coins. She could have kept one for herself to guarantee her next meal and given the other. I mean, that would have been a 50% offering, which is incredibly generous by any standard.
Right.
But she gives both.
And Jesus immediately calls his disciples over. He tells them that this poor widow has put in more than all the wealthy elites combined. Mathematically, to human eyes, that makes 0 sense.
So what does this all mean? Let me push back on this a bit. Does this mean God expects everyone listening to us right now to go to the bank today, empty their entire life savings, and drop it in an offering plate?
Well, no. The source text clarifies the mechanism behind Jesus' statement here. It's not necessarily a command to empty your physical bank account today. It's about a completely different system of measurement.
Okay, how so?
We tend to measure a gift by what it amounts to, what it can buy, how much it moves the needle on a building project or a charity drive. But Jesus measures a gift by what it costs the giver.
So he's not looking at what was put in. He's looking at what was kept back.
Precisely. The wealthy leaders gave out of their massive surplus. They gave what was left over, and their comfortable lifestyle didn't change one bit. It cost them nothing in terms of personal trust or sacrifice.
Right.
But this widow gave her entire living. She gave all that she had left to survive on.
So true devotion isn't measured by the absolute dollar amount. It's measured by how much trust is required to let it go. She didn't give out of comfort. She gave out of profound trust that God would sustain her.
Yeah.
She didn't calculate the cost and hedge her bets. She just decided that God could have all she had.
And that brings us to the final reversal of this entire deep dive. Think back to how this began. The religious leaders stepped into the temple intending to examine Jesus.
Yep, the traps.
Right. They brought their traps, their philosophical puzzles, their political maneuvers. They wanted to test him and find a flaw. But by the end of this encounter, Jesus was the one examining them.
The X-ray machine was turned on them.
He exposed their shallow belief, their intellectual pride, their divided allegiances, and their exploitative religion. The examiners ultimately became the examined.
Which is a pretty staggering thought for us today. When we approach historical texts or deep theological concepts, it's so easy to come armed with our own clever questions.
Totally.
Trying to critically test the text, trying to find the loopholes or the puzzles. But eventually, if you engage with it honestly enough, the text turns around and tests us. We start out analyzing the material, and we realize the material is analyzing us.
Yeah, the real question shifts from, can this text answer my difficult questions, to what is exposed when my own motives are examined? Will we surrender when our own empty gift boxes are revealed?
That leads us right back to where we started. We opened with this image of a loud, crowded boxing ring. We expect the significant moments of history, the things that truly matter, to be loud.
Right.
We look for the knockout punch. We look for the massive coins ringing the metal trumpets for everyone to hear.
But the public teaching ministry of Jesus doesn't end with a spectacular knockout punch against the political elites. It ends with him quietly observing an unnoticed woman making a silent sacrifice.
So we'll leave you with this final lingering thought to mull over today. If a completely anonymous widow was immortalized for a tiny, silent act of sacrifice that the rest of the world completely ignored, what hidden, seemingly insignificant choices are you making today that might hold eternal weight, even if they never make an earthly bulletin?
It definitely forces you to rethink what actually matters.
It absolutely does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.